So good morning and welcome to Unheard Manchester. I'm Ros Bragg, I'm the Director of Maternity Action. I'll be chairing the seminar today. And first, a few housekeeping matters. We've sent around the agenda and a background document. I hope you've received them. We'll be holding 2 panel sessions with 3 to 4 speakers each, and we'll hold questions until the end of each session. So at that point, to ask a question, please raise your virtual hand when we get to that Q&A. Don't put your questions in the chat, but raise your virtual hand when we get to the Q&A. And we'll be taking a short break after the second panel session. We're aiming to finish up at 12:20. Today is the second of a series of regional seminars we're holding on the impact of the cost of living crisis on pregnant women, new mothers and their families. When we began looking at the cost of living crisis and the women that we worked with, we decided to run the seminars which focused specifically on migrant and asylum-seeking women alongside seminars which covered the mainstream. This is because both of the very specific circumstances of migrant and asylum-seeking women, and because of the very different treatment of these women in current policy. We called our seminar Unheard Manchester because it was clear to us that migrant and asylum-seeking women are not being heard in the debates about the cost of living. We don't see their stories in the media. We don't hear their needs being discussed in Parliament. It's not that there aren't women and frontline organisations willing to talk about the harsh impact of the cost of living on migrant and asylum-seeking women. It's that those who make policy are not interested in hearing from them. The appalling news last week that hundreds of asylum-seeking children have gone missing from hotel accommodation is a worrying example of just how little attention is devoted to this group. So today is about exploring the experiences of migrant and asylum-seeking mothers in the cost of living crisis. But it's also about how to change the government's response so that these women's experiences are properly recognised in the package of government interventions to support families. There is no argument that we are dealing with increased costs across the board. Annual inflation at this month is 9%, and the Office of Budget Responsibility, a government agency, is predicting 12 months of recession and for unemployment to increase by 500,000. While there are predictions of growth in the future, these are necessarily uncertain predictions. The benefits of growth are not evenly spread throughout the population, and any possible rosy future should not distract from the certainty that many families are having a very dark and difficult winter and face an increasingly difficult 2023. In the autumn statement in November, the government announced a package to respond to the cost of living, costed at $49,815 million, so almost £50 billion. This consists of help with energy prices, inflation-based increases in universal credit and other benefits, one-off payments of several £100s to different groups of benefit recipients, an increase in the benefits cap, capping of social housing rents, and an additional $1 billion for the Household Support Fund. What was missing from this package was an increase in asylum support, an increase in Section 17 support, and anything, in fact, which would benefit those outside the mainstream. We did see an increase in asylum support payments in December. However, this was not because of the autumn statement or any efforts of the Home Office. The rate increase was the result of a judicial review run by the Greater Manchester Law Centre. We have increasing numbers of pregnant women and new mothers who fall outside the mainstream. Changes in the immigration system make it harder for migrants to get and to maintain secure immigration status. Over the past 15 years, we've watched as migrants are increasingly forced to make multiple applications for leave before they can achieve settled status. Applications are expensive and the system is complicated. It is very easy for women to find themselves without status, and it is very, very difficult for them to regain regular status. For asylum seekers, the system is excruciatingly slow. The government target for a decision is within 6 months. However, only a fraction of claims are settled within this timeframe. Women and their families are left waiting for months and years, and the backlog is increasing. In March last year, there were 110,000 people waiting on a decision, and this number has increased. Alongside these changes have been a succession of policy decisions to remove different groups of migrants from the mainstream benefit system. Asylum support used to be set at 90% of mainstream support. no recourse to public funds rules, and the chaotic aftermath of Brexit exclude many migrant families from benefits and services. Section 17 support, which was supposed to be a short-term measure, became the only support available to some families, and there are pregnant women and families who cannot access even this form of support. On top of this, the government expanded the scope of NHS charging. Increasing numbers of women found themselves chargeable, and NHS trusts became more aggressive in pursuing debt. For many women, this meant avoiding care altogether, or attending only when they're in labour or when something has gone horribly wrong. The impacts on pregnant women and new mothers are harsh. We know that many are living in poverty and destitution, and that this will worsen as inflation reduces the real value of their incomes. We know that many of the informal options will dry up as these families tighten their belt. Poverty and destitution exacerbate health inequalities. Already, Black and brown women are 4 times more likely to die during pregnancy and new motherhood. There is every indication that this inequality will deepen as the recession disproportionately impacts on this group. There are also real concerns about exploitation and abuse. How does a woman leave a violent relationship when she is wholly dependent on her abusive partner to feed their children? How many women will be considering situations they would never otherwise consider because of dire poverty? We'll now move on to the panel sessions, and we have a great set of speakers today. Some bring their own experience of migration and motherhood, and some work to deliver healthcare and support to women, and some are more active in campaigning. So I've got a great panel session ahead of us.
Enter the meeting password followed by hash.
And we seem to have some sound issues. Michaela, are you able to mute the source of that? Thanks. Our first speaker is Angie Katara, who's maternal health lead at the John Street Medical Practice. Angie.
Am I?
Yeah. You're on, Angie, please.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Oh, thank you for having me. My name is Angela Watara. I work for Shared Health Foundation, and I'm at the moment based at John Street Medical Practice in the Healthy Gems Hub, where we are developing a model of care that has a base here at John Street. I'd love to talk to you today about projects that we're doing. Welcome to Manchester. Really nice to be here. We're based in Oldham, but Greater Manchester is where we call home. So if you could start my presentation, that would be great. Thanks, Michaela. So as has been said before, I lead on maternal health for Shared Health. I just wanted to put this slide up first. I became a midwife, started my training in 1998, just to set a little context of where my journey with and my passion for the most vulnerable women came from. Always had a real heart for social justice, and just couldn't believe really as I started my training, became a midwife, the injustice that I saw, especially for, as Roz said, Black and brown women in our system. The NHS is a wonderful thing. I love it. I care very much about the colleagues that I've worked alongside, but it's a tricky place at times to work in when we're looking at some of those health inequalities and equitable access for the most vulnerable. Who would have known that 22 years later I would be raising my own little girl? And it just adds to the fire in my belly really as to why we're here today, for women of colour who are going on to deliver and have babies in our country, that it is really important that we continue to look at those injustices and move forward to a place where everybody has equal care. So if you'd like to go on to my next slide. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of context of where I work. So I work for Focus Care, which is a sister company for Shared Health, and we are a bunch of clinicians that look at basically how poverty impacts health inequalities and what we can do to step into the gap. And Focus Care came out of that to look at how we integrate within general practice to look at those that fall through the net so that we can bring them into our practices, that we can help them to access, just as everybody else does, the care and provision that the NHS provides. Most of our staff are Band 6 equivalent, so we're really, really intentional about the level of training that our staff come with, so that they can unpack the most complex cases. And many of them are chaotic, in crisis, We open our referral process to all those falling through the net, and we look to try and reduce the barriers and reduce the health inequalities that impact their lives. Next slide, please. So from this and being based in GP practice, we, at the beginning of the pandemic, decided to pilot the work that we were doing in bed and breakfast with homeless families. We were seeing a lot of families placed in B&Bs and lots of work there to get on with, and facing multiple barriers to health, social, education, and the social determinants of health were really evident. Lots and lots of families falling through the gap. And this is where we started to see ladies from migrant backgrounds just in our caseload starting to come through. They were definitely falling through the net, as Ros mentioned before, and weren't being able to access care and support that they needed in pregnancy. They weren't able to register with GPs. Everything went online. There was lots of issues around families that we met where they were definitely at a place in the pandemic where families were pushed to capacity, really, when everybody was in lockdown, and we started to see those women come to the surface in real desperate need and needing to be placed and in and access maternity services. So Shared Health decided to set up. We work alongside Oldham Housing, and we also obviously then work alongside all the other agencies, and we try to come alongside and make sure that we are creating relationships of trust so that we can get to the bottom of the issues, and in that we have learned so much. So I'm just very aware that I have benefited from the privilege of white privilege of being raised in the UK, and we recognise that that is part of our experience as a company, but that we are really intentional about shining a light on the health inequalities, especially for me, my passion around migrant women and their experience here. So next slide, please. So just for, obviously we've said we all believe in the NHS, we believe it's a wonderful thing. These are just some of the policies and documents that are out there at the moment that we are really trying to keep at the forefront of everything we do at Shared Health, looking at the journey of families that fall through the net in the homeless journey, and migrant women are there. We look at the neonatal mortality rates. We're just at the moment at the place where we have worked alongside the child mortality database, and some news that's hit the headlines in the last week, just around the deaths that are experienced by families experiencing homelessness, and migrant women come into that category. As I look through the spreadsheet, I cried at the number of women that I could have given names to, in a sense, that come through, and the babies that are perishing because we don't have sufficient provision for them. If we look at the NICE guidance and look at what the better births and safe equitable access and engagement, CQC, all of these policies say that we should be putting women right at the centre, but still we see that lack of access, that it isn't equitable for all women. And so as much as we celebrate the NHS and all that it does and all of our colleagues who work within it, I think it's really important to see the reality that we still have a lot of work to do in moving things forward. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to share a little bit about Helen's story. So this lady I met at a point at which she'd been placed in a bed and breakfast. This lady, as I said, she'd been with a friend while she was pregnant, but during COVID, it just got too much and the space that they were sharing was just not enough. So she ended up presenting herself as homeless. But unfortunately, although she had a master's degree, she'd overstayed on her visa and was in a place where she had no documentation. So at this point where she had delivered her little son, she was placed in emergency accommodation in Section 17. We had issues and concerns around her mental health. It was shared accommodation. There was a broken cot in the room. There were broken beds. It was not the greatest, in a sense, of bed and breakfast provision that we have. And that's what we see, unfortunately, that at that point, lots and lots of mums, new mums especially, were suffering in that postnatal period around adapting to being a mum, but also finding their place a safe place to rest and sleep. Next slide, please. When we got involved, we wanted to just bring attention. I think lots of people feel, and we definitely hear a lot about, well, they're in a hotel, they've got a nice hotel room, but we just are always in the line of work that we're doing, we are myth busting around what that actually means. If you can sum up in your head the most budget hotel with very little provision, rainy, storm, can't leave the room, and you're there for 6 to 8 weeks with a newborn baby, that just about sums it up. So there's just a list there of no room service, no breakfast, no mini fridge, often no travel cot. There's no guarantee that you won't be moved multiple times. We see that there's notifications. There is no notification to GPs or health visitors that you've been placed in that accommodation or due to be moved. And the reality is that it is often one bed per adult, but often the issues around safer sleep, we're really targeting that at the moment through Shared Health and work with the Lullaby Trust. There's a new provision, a resource that is online actually, just for everybody's, just to make note of, that is really, really wonderful, and we've worked together, and that's just been published regarding women being based in emergency situations, so transient situations, and how they can actually try to practice safer sleep for their newborns. Often there's just a kettle. So again, that then brings us on to lots of people say, well, they spend loads of money on takeaways and food and they're wasting their money. But the reality is it's not a lifestyle choice. If you're placed within that accommodation, probably the nearest shop is a Londis or maybe a corner shop that is 3 times the price. There's no fresh vegetables. There's no provision of a supermarket usually close to these accommodations, and definitely within the rooms, there's nowhere to store fresh food or to be able to cook. For many of our ladies from migrant backgrounds, they love cooking over a flame, they love making their own food that is culturally comforting but also nutritious and enables them to maintain health and well-being and sustain all that they need whilst they're pregnant and then in the postnatal period when they're breastfeeding. The problem is in these accommodations that isn't something that is available to most of them whilst they're in these emergency types of accommodation. Usually there is little more than a kettle. So we always challenge our GPs and anybody who comes to work with us, just have a little look in your local corner shop, see if you could make a healthy meal from what we can see there, because the food desert situation for most of our families is really, really difficult to overcome. Next slide, please. So some of the solutions for this, mum, so it involved the Healthy Start. She didn't have Healthy Start vitamins for her baby. She was breastfeeding and she had loads of concerns around issues around milk supply and issues of isolation around her mental health in those first few days. So we supported and liaised with the health visitors, making sure that they knew that she had been placed there. We then managed to together approach the social services and request that she'd be moved to a more suitable bed and breakfast, which then meant she was moved, interestingly, to Salford Quays into another hotel that she stayed for 7 months. And lots of people would think Salford Quays, oh, that's quite nice, but it was the budget hotel, again, a room, no facilities to cook or to prepare food. There was no breakfast provided. And so in that situation over 7 months, that's a really difficult way to try to provide for your own health and nutrition as well as a newborn, and support what you need to sustain breastfeeding. We discussed long-term contraception and we made sure that that was in place. Again, the stability of family planning is something that doesn't often become an option, and so we're really passionate about that women have a choice about when they next conceive, and that we support them with that and access to that. What we notice is the lack of those services in areas of deprivation, that there needs to be more access. We're always trying to find routes into sexual health and family planning for our ladies that is accessible and is at point of need. So in that little window of intervention where we get that, yeah, that's what I want, we're always trying to ensure that that happens. As I've said before, the safer sleep cots provided, we provide and ensure that we give that option for mums to practice safer sleep. And while we're doing that, all the time we were trying to support with the Section 17 and the fears and concerns around social services, being under social services. Are they going to take my baby if I don't get my documentation? Will that then lead to my baby being taken away? There's a huge amount of fear and anxiety that rise the journey along with their mental health. That means that we have to support that in a really intentional way.
Angie, Ros here. Can I just ask you to wind up? Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. So if we can move on to the next slide, that lady then thankfully got her papers and is settled now in a tenancy. I just wanted to bring to people's attention as well the food banks and baby banks that are available to support families, and they are really, really important and very much used throughout Greater Manchester. This was just a quick story that I wanted to raise attention with, a discharge from hospital into a bed for every night. This was escalated, but it's just to be aware as health professionals that some of these decisions do end up being made in trying to discharge women from hospital with the pressures on the NHS. And I think that's really important, again, that we make sure if we see those events happening, although they may be few and far between, that we raise it at a higher level within the discharge process within the hospital setting. She again now is settled with papers, so I'm pleased to say. The next slide, please. It's just, if you want any more information, we've got 2 little videos, we'll send it out. Please get in contact with Shared Health. And we would love to answer any more questions.
Thanks very much, Angie. Fascinating to see the range of work that you're doing and also the challenges that you're facing as a healthcare practitioner. It is extraordinary to see such vulnerable women in such difficult circumstances. The questions will hold until the end of this panel. So our next speaker is Masida. Masida will be speaking about her lived experience, and Masida's involved with Refugee Women Connect in Liverpool. Masida, could you unmute yourself?
Yes, hello everybody, and thank you for being today here. I'll speak about my experience. I have been in asylum process more than 4 years now, and I have born my son here in Liverpool, where I'm based. And about in my lived experience as an asylum seeker, I have had many difficulties through this time. First of all, when I had my first scan in the hospital, the doctor wasn't very good behaved. It was really racist, and I couldn't do my scan. This was my first difficulty, and this was really bad for me because being a woman, 7 months pregnant, and not being able to do this first scan was horrible. But this wasn't the first difficulty that I was facing. When I gave birth, I was in an initial accommodation where I was in a hostel, living with 6 other women, sharing. I had like a single bed. I didn't have space for a cot bed or nothing else. It was really small. And you can see where we could sleep together or offer this safe sleep for me and my baby was impossible because no space, and the health visitor didn't do nothing. The midwife was rude as well. She told me, as long as you have a roof under your head, is everything all right? You don't need nothing else. But I wasn't quiet as long as I fight for my rights and I raise my voice, because as long as I'm an asylum seeker, but if I don't speak about my rights, nobody will do it. And if we can all raise our voice and fight for our rights, we could do something better for the other women, not to be the same as in my situation. Maybe it was my knowledge of the language was good because I have a master's degree from my country and a university degree as well. And maybe I was used to fight for my rights, even if I was an asylum seeker. Through my lived experience as well, I moved 3 houses with a small baby. I moved in Manchester, I came back to Liverpool in 3 weeks' time. And he was just 1 month old baby. It was really difficult, and you can imagine my mental health was really, really bad and down. And still I'm living in a shared house where I'm sharing my room with my son. He's 4 years old now. And what impact could be now for him as he's going to nursery and everybody has their own room. Sorry. And I'm not able to offer to him. But as I said, I have to fight for my rights. Sorry.
That's okay, Masita, take your time.
Yeah, but it's still like, as I said, I'm trying to complete myself and to do this because I have been doing many trainings for advocacy, for other women to raise their voice, because I'm strong on myself and I wanted the other women to be strong as well and to raise their voice. But you go in one point that you can't go further. I have finished the ISO course and everything. I have done teaching assistant. And when you come in the end, you see that you can't go any further because of this situation that you are still asylum seeker. And I don't know what can happen if my son can ask for a holiday I can't offer, or to go somewhere that I can afford it because of this rises. And it's impossible to offer everything to him that I want to. But as I said, we hope for a better future. And as long as we have this, as long as we have this organization that help us, and if we need like emotional support or mental health support, we have this organization that help us. Because if we stay in this home office, we can't do nothing from them. We can't have anything from them. Even if my son is going on health conditions, I'm asking for a new house for me and for him. They are not accepting at all. And I have the letter from the doctor since 1 year ago, and they're not doing nothing. And I don't know what to say, anything else. The reason is that it's really hard to live as asylum seeker. And especially when the baby is grown up, because they ask questions and you are not able to answer their questions, because it makes you feel in a very bad situation. Because you can't explain. How can you explain a 4-year-old boy that you can't? He can't understand why we can't have it. Why he can't have his own room, or why he can't have anything that their children have. It's really difficult. It's really hard. Really. Isn't easy. All this journey isn't easy for anyone. But for a mom with a small baby and a pregnant woman, I can say that from my own experience, I can say that it's twice harder, because all this asylum process is hard for everybody. But being pregnant and going through this kind of person that you have pains everywhere, that they are rude, they don't respect you, they say, oh, you're coming here for pleasure, you're coming here. They don't know nothing about you, and they just is horrible. In everything is horrible. They don't respect you, really. They don't respect you for nothing. Even if you say that you are fully educated, you have a master's degree and everything, they don't respect you. They just see you as an asylum seeker. They don't respect you for what you're saying, for what you're doing, for what you are. But just because you are an asylum seeker, they think that you are not having rights for nothing, and you are just doing, you are bad, that you are doing bad that you are here. This is my lived experience as an asylum seeker during my pregnancy as well, and during my 4-year-old son. And it's really hard being an asylum seeker in this situation and through this time as well.
Well, thank you very much, Masita.
Thank you for hearing. Thank you to everybody.
It's a really powerful presentation, and I think, I'm sure all of us are just so happy you're out there fighting for your rights and fighting for other women's rights. It's your stories, very hard to listen to and not see the profound injustice that women are facing. So thank you very much for speaking today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Our next speaker is Jay from Unheard Manchester. Now, Jay, I just want to check we've still got you. I think you dropped out briefly on our list of people on our Zoom meeting. Are you here, Jay? Could you unmute yourself? I think I can see the... Jay, would you... Michaela, would you check we've unmuted?
I've asked her to unmute, so Jay, you should be able to unmute when you're able to.
Right.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica, and I'm a member of WAS. Actually, it's been a very, very difficult process for me and my family. I have 3 children, and I've been in the country about 2 years. And up until now, there is no call for a second interview to hear my case. It's been a very, very devastating condition for me. Just in the middle of nowhere. And I provide that, which is the money, the weekly money is nothing at all for me and my family. Many times the children will ask for what I cannot even afford. I'm from Africa, and many of the food here has nothing that they find easy to eat. I have to go out of my way. I live in Blackburn, I go to Manchester. That's the closest place I can get my Africa kind of food for my children, and which are very, very expensive. I could remember through this, during the last Christmas, my kids keep demanding, because to an extent they've gotten their exposure. They've been this kind of children that have been, touring around to some certain country even before we came here to seek asylum, because our life is being threatened, and I don't want to stay back home and lose my life or lose my children. I have to take them and run for safety when I can. So sometimes I keep asking myself if I've done anything wrong, but I don't think I've done anything wrong. That's what a parent should do for their children, When you see that their life is not safe, you protect them. But when you come over here, they make you feel like you're nothing, no? The help is nothing. It's nothing. Just there, you can give your children the kind of life, they believe in, My kids will go online and pick so many things they want, normal things that they used to do back home. Because to an extent, I can provide for my children. They live some kind of certain life, but we come here and we are reduced to nothing. And they just keep you in the middle of nowhere. You don't even know what is going to come out. You don't even know if there's any hope, nothing. The frustration is just too much. Anytime I think about my decision, I would like, have I made a mistake? But what can I do? What's a better solution? My therapist who said, I've done well. I've done well. You've done well for your family. I'm a victim of FGM, and my children are at the risk of it. And presently, I'm still living with the pain that I'm still trying to get, treatment, help from. Life pain. I mean, when I say pain, I'm living with life pain. So when you're living with such pain and someone told you that the same thing has to be done of your children, can't imagine myself being in the pain and seeing my children passing through this pain. So as much as I want to blame myself for some, decision I made on behalf of my family, on the other hand, I don't know, I'm just confused sometimes because, when life is just difficult, you can't do things for your children as a parent, you feel frustrated because you brought these children to this life. You should be able to provide for their needs. You should be able to make them comfortable, which is what I've been doing from the very first day I gave birth to my children. I know I'm capable for this task. I know what I'm into. But when situation happen to you, circumstances happen to you, you have to flee from your conveniency to a place where, like a middle of nowhere, you expect that there should be some kind of sympathy, some kind of, empathy in a way. Nothing. They just put you in a state you're confused. And provision, when you don't want us to work, we can't work, and we're just there. And the little resources you give to us is nothing. It's so difficult. I don't know what they want us to do. And you keep keeping people down for years, not even months. Nobody's hearing our voice. All thanks to WAS for giving us, the platform and giving us the little help we needed, emotionally support, a lot of support sometimes. They do program for children, for family, at least for us to feel, alive in a way. I don't know what would have become of us. It's just so pathetic. That is all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. I found that really hard to listen to think that that's how we treat women and their children in this country. And thank you very much for sharing your story. I think it's very hard to know that you are still dealing with this problem years into your time in the UK. This is not how you should be treating women in this country or their children. Thank you. Thanks, Jessica. Okay, we'll now move to questions and answers. And Jessica and Marcita, if you'd like to take part in this, you're welcome, but equally, if you'd prefer not to, just say, that's fine. But we'll take Q&A from the floor, and Angie, if you could also be available for answering questions. Could I ask people to put their questions in the chat?
Can I just say thank you to both ladies for sharing their story? It was really, really powerful. And just, that journey of not knowing the end, I think we see time and time again, of not knowing when it's going to end is a massive pressure. And I just worry that the expectations of ladies and families is difficult. We try to manage that all the time as they pass into having their papers and then enter another system where they have to wait to be housed. It's really tricky, but I think to bring hope and to bring compassion and care is really important.
Thanks, Angie. Would people like to raise their hands if they want to speak? I can't see any hands raised. I can't see anything further in the chat other than, thank you to Jay and Marcita for speaking. So can I echo that? Thank you very much. I see there's a comment here from Natalie Wilkins. Delay in decision making can be challenged by judicial review. Have any women been able to access legal representation to do that, and did they get anywhere? I don't know if anyone would like to respond to that. It's a big question, I think, given the scale of delay in the asylum process.
I think that the problem is solicitors often won't take those cases because for them it's become the norm, these extended delays. So it has to be pretty long, which is not acceptable to us or the families and the women and the pregnant women and the children concerned. But for solicitors, they take an overall view, so that's quite hard to do. find the right solicitor for that.
Yes, I'm sure finding the right solicitor is quite a challenge. I think there's a profound shortage of immigration advice that women can afford at the moment, particularly legal aid funded support. Okay, we have no further comments, so we'll move on to our next panel. But before that, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Angie, to Jay, Jessica and Marcida for speaking. Thank you very much. Oh, now we've got one hand that's gone up. iPhone, would iPhone like to speak?
Hello, hi. I think it's worth. Can you hear me first? Because I'm in.
Yes.
Yeah, great. I think it is worth mentioning that I am a migrant worker myself. I've been here for years and years, so I have the British nationality, and it was not the same route as asylum seeker. However, it's really, really difficult. So from my view, when I see how an asylum seeker actually starts the decision from the homeland to leave because of fear of everything, I understand how difficult it is. But I think I've come to realize that the journey of an asylum seeker actually, in a way, almost has no end. Because sometimes you think you've reached the refuge, the UK or whatever country you're heading for, and this is not actually the end of your journey. The end of the journey can stay for years and years. So I understand why you may blame yourself, but you can't blame yourself. You only had to do what you had to do, and you're doing your best to save your family, save your kids and yourself. I believe that there is a lack of support, psychological, emotional support for asylum seekers, because the amount of stress they feel is actually unbearable, and it's always diluted when we talk about it. Because I kid you not, I hear a lot of stories like this. You're not unique. These two cases are not unique. As sad as it to say, there are hundreds of people who feel like this, and sometimes it's actually desensitizes decision makers. And this is where we actually need to do something. I always believe in revolution, and I stand that, going to the streets and trying to advocate and stuff like that. And actually, it does happen. I'm a member or an activist who stand up to racism, and refugees are welcome here, and all this. And I think there's more. We need to see more people actually involved in this. And it is racism, because I'm not going to be afraid to say that Ukrainians were actually in a horrible situation at the moment, and my heart is with every one of them. But they are called visitors in this country. They're not called asylum seekers or refugees or whatever, and they are welcome. So there is a bit of, well, not a bit. It is racism at the core, to be honest, if we're actually saying it as it is. And this is an issue that we need to tackle everywhere, in the workplace, in the community, in the neighborhoods. And we have to empower each other, and we can't let you feel bad or sad. It's okay to cry, but your tears will empower you somehow to stand again and try to get to where you want again. And hopefully we will try to help and advocate for proper policies and hopefully laws to change this situation. My heart is with you both and with everyone, and hopefully we can try to find a way forward.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Eunice, I can see your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. And I want to say thank you to Angie, who started the whole thing, and mention about issues that migrant women are facing in asylum seekers in particular. And I want to say a huge thank you to the two bravery women, Marcida and Jessica, for raising your voice, because it's not easy even to be in this platform, to share your feelings, to say to the amazing people here what you are going through. And as our last speaker said, what are we doing? And we are all here, we've heard, we've seen what is going on. It will not take us, with the organizations, to raise our voices. It takes the public as well. Now that we've gathered here, we've heard, we came here for a reason, just to hear what is going on, just to share our paths, what we are going to do to make a change. So please, let us make change so that asylum seekers will not feel like they've committed crime for seeking asylum. It's not their fault. And I know the system has failed them. The system is designed to dehumanize them, to make them feel that they are the problem, but they are not the problem. Their thing is to run away, to flee from what is, as Jess said, she's a victim of FGM. She has experienced it herself, and she got 2 girls who they are going to experience the same. Should we also, Britain is a safe country, just to welcome people, just to keep people in a safe place. But these women don't feel that. Jessica doesn't feel that because the kids are going to be in the same situation. And even for her to leave a place to find safety for her kids, that's a brave thing for her to do. So the system shouldn't make her feel that she's done something that is like, she feels so criminal, like she's a criminal. She's not. She's running for safety. So we should welcome her and then make her feel, even though if we cannot provide her the support, just put her safety. I always say put human beings first. They are human beings. So let us treat them as human beings, how we want us to be treated. So please, let us all raise our voice and advocate. Let the people hear, let the policymakers hear what these women are going through. It's not easy. And I love the topic of the unheard. Asylum seeking women are not being heard. Our asylum seekers, they are not being heard. Look at the cost of living. We support lots of women. These are the few women, 2 women we've heard. What about the hundreds of women that we have here? We have hundreds of women who attend our dropping every Friday. They come with different various issues. We have destitute women. Is that how to treat women? Women are vulnerable. So please, let us stay together. Let us raise our voices to support them so that all their needs, all the things that they are going through will be able to head and make a change. Thank you very much for this.
Thanks very much, Eunice. Powerful words. Thank you. We'll move now to our second panel session. And we have 3 speakers. And the first of our speakers is Maria Houlihan, who's Service Manager and Social Worker at GMIAU. Maria, would you like to take the floor?
Yeah, thanks, Rosin. Just before I start, just to second what everyone's just said just then, and thanks very much for Maternity Action for putting this on, because I think it's really important that we have these sort of events to be able to call things out and, and highlight the injustices and, and find our collective voice to fight these kind of injustices in the system. So I see it every day. I work at GMIAU. We're an immigration charity in Manchester, and I manage what we call our destitution team. So we're supporting families and women and children actually that are in the immigration system and facing hardship, homelessness of some sort. And today I'm going to talk about Section 17 support. We also support a lot of women seeking asylum and stuck in the hotels and things like that. But we're focusing, my session is on Section 17 support. So thank you. Can I have the next slide? This is kind of what we do, and our website's there. You can refer people to us through the website now. We've got a portal, so if anyone is supporting someone and needs some support, Section 17 or asylum support, or legal advice, please do make a referral to us. As was highlighted, we're very busy. There isn't a lot of capacity at all, for legal aid solicitors, so it's really tough to get a solicitor at the moment. But we'll always try and give some advice if we can't take the case on. So thanks. And the next slide. So I'm just going to briefly talk about what Section 17 is, who has no recourse to public funds, who does it apply to, who can access Section 17 support, and then the reality for families in need of Section 17 support. And at the end, there's some links to other resources that you can have a look at. So next one. So Section 17, it's Section 17 of the Children's Act 1989. It places a general duty on local authorities to safeguard and promote the welfare of children within their area who are in need. So it's a very broad definition and a very low threshold for assessment. So it's, you know, in our line of work, we talk about Section 17 in a very specific way to mean financial support and housing, but it's available to anyone, you know, and mainly people access it where there's a risk of the child not being able to stay at home, and it's to make sure that they can do that. So it could be the very minimum sort of things that are provided are advice and support by social services, but it can also be for more inventive things like paying for after school clubs or equipment or laptops. We've seen it used to pay for passports for EU nationals to make sure they can get their EU settlement, or paying for British citizenship applications for children to allow the rest of the family to settle. And then, of course, what we're talking about here today is that it can be used to pay for accommodation and financial support for those who haven't got anywhere else to turn to. You know, so the people who can't access mainstream benefits and local authority housing because of their immigration status. So it's provided for by children's services, and some bigger local authorities like Manchester have got specialist no recourse to public funds teams. Okay, next slide. Thanks. And this is just telling you what public funds are. So it's nearly all benefits and social housing. And people who've got no recourse to public funds are generally temporary migrants in the UK, or those who haven't got lawful status. What it's not, and this is often people get confused about the things on the right hand side of the slide. So this is where eligibility varies, and you have to check depending on someone's status or circumstances. So things like legal aid, free school meals, nursery hours, they've just been sort of widened, the scope has been widened to allow more people to access. Social care, NHS treatment, education, and Section 17 support itself. So ironically, we've had women turned away from Section 17 support saying, no, it's a public fund, you can't get this. I've had to explain what it's there for. So next slide, please. Okay, and who has no recourse to public funds? So it's generally anyone on a short-term visa, like visitors or workers, students, anyone who's overstayed their visa, or irregular migrants, people who haven't ever sorted their immigration status. Asylum seekers and refused asylum seekers have a separate system of asylum support. And then there's EU nationals as well. So any EU nationals arriving after the end of the transition period, they have no recourse to public funds. And those who are on pre-settled status and haven't been working, you know, would normally be excluded. And lots of families are being supported under Section 17 by social services at the moment while they wait till they can get settled status through the EU settlement. And then there's this group who've got limited leave to remain under private and family life routes. So, for example, where they've got a child who's lived 7 years in the UK, then you can make this human rights application and the family get put on this 10-year route to settlement with limited leave. And the no recourse to public funds condition is always attached to that. And it causes an awful lot of problems, and we help a lot of families in that situation. Okay, next slide. So what happens if someone needs Section 17? So they approach children's services. Children's services should accommodate while they assess. So there's emergency support. This often isn't given, so we have to push for that. They have to do pre-screening assessment and checks with the Home Office, and there's a duty on the social services to inform the Home Office. So obviously this puts a lot of families off, depending on what their situation is. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but so they check nationality and check the immigration status with the Home Office. Then they'll carry out the child in need assessment, which often focuses on, the finance of the family and not actually the need of the child. So that's sometimes lacking in these assessments. A human rights assessment, so this second assessment might get done if the family's an excluded group. So that would be irregular migrants or visa overstayers or some refused asylum seekers. And then they have to do this second assessment to check whether there's a barrier to leave in the UK. And then ongoing reviews. And at the bottom there, I've just put some stats from the NRPF network, which is a really useful website. It's there to support local authorities really, but it's got really good guidance on it. So typically, families are on this type of support for 1.6 years. Mainly people come off it because they've got a better grant of leave, you know, that allows them access to benefits. 2% left the UK, and around 64 million spent by local authorities. That's probably a minimum estimate. And there's a link there to some more information. So thanks, next one. And just to give you a flavour of the type of people we support, so there's a couple of recent referrals that we've had. So we had a single mother of 5 children. She had an all right job. She was working in a bank, I think, and earning about 25 grand, but it just wasn't anywhere near enough. She was on this 10-year route to settlement, and she was having to loan money to pay for the application. So you have to pay for every member of the family. And I think it's about £1,000 per person when you have the NHS surcharge, and she was paying for a solicitor as well. So she borrowed lots of money to pay for this, and then really struggling to pay it back. And, you know, and the effects of that was, you know, that was awful. An expensive rent. The house was in a mess. There was no heating or hot water. Children not eating properly, only getting meals at school, and they were always hungry. And it was actually social services who referred this family to us. So we asked the Home Office to remove that no recourse to public funds condition. So in certain circumstances, especially when people are on this 10-year route, private life route, you can say, you know, the family's in this situation, we need to remove that condition. So and lots of times people don't know that you can even ask to do that. So do let us know if you're supporting people in that situation. And then we've done their subsequent applications for them well, so they don't need to be paying a solicitor to do this. And then the other recent example that I've given here is a woman who's overstayed her visa by many years. She's now got a 10-month-old baby, a British baby, and she'd made an application to the Home Office. So good reasons to be in the UK, and she couldn't leave the UK. And then she had to flee domestic violence from her partner, who she was living with in a local authority. She went to their homeless team, and they turned her away, said, no, you've got no recourse to public funds, off you go. So she went and stayed with a friend in the neighbouring local authority. And she eventually approached that social services because a friend, you know, said she couldn't stay there any longer. And they said, no, you've lived all your time here in the next local authority, so go back there. And of course, she went back to that one, and they said, no, you're physically present in the other one, which is the correct response. It should be where you're physically present. And in the end, we supported her. We sent a letter before action to the local authority that she was physically in, and they did accommodate her. And just to highlight, you know, because it's a very intrusive assessment process, that the one local authority has even contacted the ex-partner to try and verify whether the abuse had taken place, by asking the abuser himself, which we thought beggared belief, really. Okay, next one. And then this is just a slide about the realities that we see. So some of the problems. So I think the biggest problem we find is just the inconsistency of it all. You know, even local authorities where there is a no recourse to public funds team, you get a different response every time you refer someone, and you know, and it's hard to hold them to account. You know, there's often no clear policies when it comes to Section 17 support. They're often placed women in grotty hotels and told, oh, use a food bank, you know, rather than giving actual financial support. Or sometimes the financial support is given just for the child or the children, you know, and there's that kind of stop response. Oh, we've only got the responsibility to the child and not the rest of the family. You know, we have to point out that if the caregivers drop dead, you're going to have a bigger problem on your hands. So the support itself isn't good. We find women are moved around from place to place until they kind of realise, yes, we do have a responsibility here. You know, the other things we see are, you know, this duty to inform. The Home Office puts a lot of families off going to social services in the first place. So families that might really need help, but they know they haven't there isn't a barrier perhaps to them returning to their own country. So they're out there, they're kind of relying off food banks and really struggling. So yeah, long time to assess, threats to end support all the time, especially if you don't go and get legal advice, if you haven't sorted your case out yet. Sometimes when the case is with the Home Office and it's not, it's not their problem at all. Okay, next slide. I think I'm going over time, so I won't go into much detail about this one, but if you've got time to have a look at this piece of research that looked into serious case reviews for families who had no recourse to public funds and who were in contact with social services, and it just highlights some of these issues, the inconsistencies about the support given. And then next slide is just some links to other sources of support. So I would always recommend starting with Project 17's website. There's some really, really useful resources on there, like template letters to challenge local authorities. That's really good. If you need to challenge a decision of a local authority, it's got to be done by judicial review, so you need a solicitor. So come to GMIU or Greater Manchester Law Centre in this area, and we'd hopefully take the case on or give some advice about it. Okay, and then I think the next slide is just my email. So please do get in touch if you've got anyone you want to discuss or make a referral through the website.
Thanks very much, Maria. That covered a lot of ground and incredibly valuable having GMIU there to step in to help women through such a complicated system. We'll be taking questions at the end of this session, so I'll move through the next two speakers before we come back to questions. So if you could just hold your questions till then, that'd be great. Okay, our next speaker is Bianca Valperga, who is the Advice on Individual Rights in Europe Centre. So welcome, Bianca.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Yes, sorry, just to clarify, I know my job title is a bit weird at times. I am based at the AIR Centre in London, but I am on secondment to Here for Good, which is a charity that specialises on the EU settlement scheme, which is what I'm going to talk about today. Michele, if I can have the slide. Thank you, great. Yes, so the EU settlement scheme is quite a big subject, similar to Section 17, to discuss. But what I would like to do today is just to give some context of what the EU settlement scheme is and what issue we're seeing, with the hopes that, to tie in also to what was discussed before, to the hopes that this information is able to empower people in terms of their rights and their immigration status. And immigration status are very essential, but at the same time difficult subject for people. So I think it's essential for applicants to have an idea of what their immigration status is, what it means, and what their rights are. So just to give an introduction as to who we are. So Here for Good, as I said, is a charity that was designed to help people apply under the EU settlement scheme. In case anyone has many questions after this presentation, we're happy for you to get in touch with us. And we provide advice through 3 different ways. So first one is an advice line service. So you can phone us, it's every day at different times. I didn't put the number down because we're going through some issue there, but there's our website. So you can go on our website and find out the phone number that you can phone us on. We also provide email advice. So someone can send a request for email advice that then it's provided. I think that's a great option for people then are able to, for example, apply themselves, because that will give them, again, the rights and the information they need to make the application themselves. But of course, there will be a good amount of people that will not be able to apply by themselves and will need our help in making the representation. And that's something we do as well. So we represent people in making the USS application to the Home Office, or provide further evidence, or challenge delays, or challenge refusal. All of that is something that we can do. As a charity, we exist to give help to vulnerable individuals. So we ask people to complete what we call a mean testing form, but our definition of vulnerability is quite broad. So I invite everybody to that maybe need to send a referral, and then we can see if there's something we can do, and we provide help for free, so there will be no legal fee connected to it. So that's just the intro of who I am and what I do. And if we could go to the next slide. As I said, this is a very bite-sized introduction to the EU settlement scheme. And if there's any question at the end, I'm happy to expand, or if anybody want to get in touch, I'm happy to get more in detail. The EU settlement scheme essentially was established as a result of the decision of the UK to leave the EU. It makes a change from how the situation was beforehand for EA national and their family member in the UK, who enjoyed rights based on EU treaty law. Now that stopped applying in the way they used to apply as of December 2020, and the EU settlement scheme was introduced. Now, a disclaimer that I want to say, because sometimes there's a bit of lack of information on the subject. The EU settlement scheme, as I mentioned, is open to EA national and their family member. So if anybody's in this seminar and thinks that they may be eligible, I just want to mention again, it's not just if you are EU national, but also if you're a family member of an EU national, or if you are the former family member of a EU national in some circumstances. If that's something that may apply to you, a date to keep in mind is the 31st December 2020, which is the end of the transition period, and is the date by which someone had to be in the UK to be eligible for the EU settlement scheme. There is a small, well, not that many small, but there's also an option for joining family member. So for someone that wasn't living in the UK, but the relationship was existing before December 2020, to also apply under the scheme. Another important date to keep in mind was end of June 2021, which was the deadline to apply under the EU settlement scheme. I want to say to this as well, the deadline was June, but at the moment, the Home Office continued to accept late application. So if someone again is eligible to apply and has not applied, they may be able to submit a late application. You will need to provide evidence as to why you have not submitted an application in time. And there are some reasonable grounds that the Home Office is considering. Some of them, for example, are quite lenient. So for example, for children, guidance says essentially children will be accepted as having made a late application. They will not look into reason as to why a child has not applied, they will accept it. So I just wanted to mention that. And if we go to the next slide, thank you. As I said, I was already talking about it in the first slide. I was talking about the application. And then just in terms of the outcome of an application under the EU settlement scheme, there are two possible status, which is pre-settled status and settled status. Now, pre-settled status is limited leave to remain for initial 5 years, whilst settled status is indefinite leave to remain, which is for essentially as long as one decides to stay in the UK. Another thing that it's worth mentioning, considering the rest of the immigration rules application that one can submit, is that an application under the settlement scheme is free. So of course, that could be quite beneficial in terms of receiving indefinite leave to remain within a 5-year period and without having to go through the huge fee that Maria was discussing. Also, I just want to make a quick mention of something that's currently in the courts. So that's not really something that I could rely greatly on, but I think it's worth mentioning. There's recently been a judgment brought by the IMA, which is Independent Minority Authority, to challenge essentially the understanding of the Home Office of the difference or the upgrading between pre-settled to settled status, with the Independent Minority Authority arguing that essentially the Home Office shouldn't request for someone to make another application for settled status according to the withdrawal agreement. This is very much at the very early stage of litigation, so I just want to put it out there for completion of information. But as I said, it's at the early stage, so it's not really something that I could start advising people on, but I just want to let people know that that exists. If we can go to the next slide. So in the next 2 slides, I try to encapsulate some of the issues I've been seeing with the EU settlement scheme. unfortunately, there are many. I'm going to be very honest. There are many issues that we're seeing with the youth settlement scheme. And when I spoke to Jerry as well, I tried to put down some of the main issue that we're seeing. And I think specifically for the group of people that maybe in this meeting and the maternity action might help with. So I just tried and essentially think about people that I've seen, clients that I've helped, that, for example, might have been pregnant migrant women that have been or just had a child or were single mother of a child, and trying to see what is the issue they've been facing, and then we can speak about. I think the first one, I don't know if this is an issue, but it's something I want to stress very hard, is that anyone that's eligible to apply and has not yet applied should apply as soon as possible, because that's how they can secure the immigration status. Unfortunately, as I said, with the end of the transition period, for example, those cards someone could have gotten under the old regulation, so those old residence cards under the EA regulation are not valid anymore unless they are converted essentially into pre-settled or settled status. So if anybody has one of those cards and has not yet done so, they need to apply as soon as possible to secure the immigration status. Unfortunately, someone that is eligible for it, so for example, EA national or the family member that has not applied and should have, would face the the hostile environment with everything that comes with it. So all of the issue they one have in accessing housing, accessing benefit, unfortunately, in accessing most aspect of one's life. So that's why it's very important to still put it out there that the youth settlement scheme is still very much current, and it's still very much an issue that people should apply to if they're eligible for. Another information that I want to give out that I think a lot of people, a lot of clients that come to me tend to not realize that children must apply to, no matter how young they are, no matter unfortunately how small your child is or how long they've been in the UK, they will need to apply as well. The caveat is, of course, if someone is born British, and to that I would advise to seek advice in terms of British nationality at birth, which unfortunately is not automatic in someone being born in the UK. There are different requirements and one has to look at, but if you have any question about that, I can give you some information about organizations that do a great work about advising people about their British nationality entitlement. As I said, again, I want to stress again, because that doesn't come through, late application can be made. So the fact that the application deadline has passed doesn't mean that you cannot apply. You can, as long as you have reasonable ground. I would suggest you seek advice to do that. And then if we can move to the last slide, there's again a couple of issues that I want to talk about. I think the first one has to do with digital status, and has to do with a decision by the UK government that any status under the youth settlement scheme will be digital only. They are still issuing some residence card to family member, but those resident cards, according to their own decision of the UK government, would expire by the end of 2024, because after that day, everything will be moved digital. Since considering the USS has been a pilot in this, unfortunately, I cannot say it's been that good of an example. So there has been a lot of issue in terms of knowledge of applicants and anyone around them about this new digital status. So we hear about issues in providing proof that someone has pre-settled settled status, because that will require you to go online into your online portal, which is view and prove your immigration status. You can look it up on gov.uk and show, let's say, your landlord, let's say your employer, or whoever is asking that you do have that status. Again, that is why I put in one of the issue, because I think it's good to raise awareness to applicants directly, to people directly of this, just so that people are prepared. Thank you, that people are prepared what is that they need to show when they are asked that. Similar and connected in terms of that is also an issue improving certificate of application, which are very important piece of document that are given when an application is validated, which provide some rights to the person until their application is being decided. I think that I want to mention is also NHS charges. Again, that goes into awareness of your rights. the 3 Million Maternity Action and others sent a letter to the Home Office back in June, to which they responded to confirm that someone that has pre-settle or settle, or someone that has a certificate of application, so that may not be a valid application, has has access to NHS care and doesn't have to pay for the charges that are connected to it, excluded those that those type of help that it's provided to everyone. And I think that I mentioned again, as a family member, I put it there as a whole topic in terms of issue, because I think there's a lack of understanding and awareness sometimes in terms of who is a family member. And if you have any doubts about that, I would say seek specialized advice, come to us, we can discuss this. Just in terms of, for example, how someone could obtain their rights through their EA child, or someone could obtain their rights even though, for example, the relationship has broken down because of abuse, just to give some examples. So again, if you feel you fall in that category, please come back to us and we can discuss more. I'm very close to my 12 minutes. So if it's needed, I will stop and I can discuss more in the Q&A.
Thanks very much, Bianca. It's an enormous amount of material to get through in a short time. I'm very conscious of that. A very complex area. Thank you very much for taking us through that. I think there's lots of very, very helpful material there for people to have a look at. I'm sure there's a lot of women in Manchester who are in this situation and very uncertain about what to do. So thank you. Thank you for that. Our next speaker is Julia Savage. Julia is the Northwest Regional Campaign Manager for Asylum Matters. Julia, handing over to you.
Thanks, Ros. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here. As Ros said, I'm the campaigns manager for Asylum Matters in the Northwest, although I am based in Greater Manchester, currently sitting in Hume talking to you. Do you have the slides, Michaela? Great, thanks. Let's just go straight to the next one. Brill. So just a little bit about who we are. In case you haven't heard of us before, Asylum Matters is a small campaigning and advocacy organisation set up in 2017. There aren't very many of us, but we do have a person in several different parts of the country, including here in the Northwest, and that's me. We're not a frontline organisation. We don't have a casework function. So although I'm going to talk to you a bit about asylum support today, I'm not a support advisor in any way, shape or form. We're a kind of advocacy organisation. Some of the other stuff that we campaign on, I've put at the bottom of that slide. And I just wanted to comment, especially in respect of the brilliant speeches and contributions that we heard before from women with lived experience of the asylum system, about how all of this sort of stuff comes together really to form a really hostile environment for people seeking asylum. Some of the other stuff that we're involved in campaigning about, so fight the anti-refugee laws, that's in respect of the pernicious and horrible Nationality and Borders Act, which came in last year, and we're expecting more hostile legislation going down the tracks. Communities Not Camps, that's campaigning in respect of the increasing move towards kind of segregated institutional accommodation. I think we heard from our first speaker today about the reality of life in hotel accommodation, which is obviously a massive problem at the moment. And the Lift the Ban campaign, which is the campaign to win the right to work for people seeking asylum after 6 months of waiting for a decision on their claim, which is the case in many other European countries. So I suppose just very briefly, just to note that we are living in an incredibly kind of regressive, hostile policy framework overall, as well as in relation to asylum support. Next slide, please. And one of the things, I suppose, as well, which Ros mentioned at the beginning, which sets the context importantly for discussions about asylum support, is that we are obviously in a massive decision-making backlog. And the result of that is that people seeking asylum are in the asylum system for much longer than is in any way acceptable or human at the moment. Okay, so asylum support. First thing to mention is as people have said before, people seeking asylum in the UK do not have any real right to work and provide for themselves or their families. So in a nutshell, people with an ongoing asylum claim are entitled, there's two main kinds of support, which is the same amount now, one under Section 95, sorry, of the Immigration and Asylum Act of 1999. That's when asylum support became a thing, if you like, started with the National Asylum Support Service in 2000 following the 99 Act. For those people with an ongoing claim, that's support under Section 95 of that Act of £45 per person per week. For people who have had their asylum claims refused, can access or may be able to access support under Section 4 of the same Act. That is not automatic. There are a number of stipulations in order to be able to access that support, and it is cashless. So it's on a prepaid card, no actual cash. For people who are in full board accommodation, of which there are many at the moment, asylum support is £9.10 a week. And there are some incredibly small additional payments of £3 weekly for pregnant women and children 1 to 3, and £5 if baby is under a year. We don't think those have ever gone up. They certainly haven't gone up since 2015. So that is something that we are advocating for to happen. And in addition, maternity payments, one-off payments, £300 for people on Section 95, £250 for people on Section 4. There are time limits for those payments. So 8 weeks before a baby is born or 6 weeks after, which means that people don't access them in the way that they should. Next slide, please. A little bit about the history of asylum support, just because it's kind of instructive in kind of, I suppose, setting out the trajectory of what's happened. So when it was set up, asylum support was set at 70% of income support, so mainstream benefits. And that was the rationale for that, was that furnished accommodation was provided and utility bills were not being paid. That remained the situation until 2008, when the link with mainstream benefits was broken, and then nothing happened, basically. So rates were frozen for a period of some years. The Home Office was taken to court about that. And the courts found that the Secretary of State had acted irrationally in setting support rates, and a full review was then undertaken by the Home Office of how they did this. And it was a fairly disastrous exercise, really, because the Home Office, in their review of support to families, decided that payments provided under current arrangements result in families receiving significantly more cash than is necessary to meet their essential living needs. And this is where this kind of concept of essential living needs came in, which has set the direction of policy on asylum support since then, and resulted in a reduction in support for children under 16 of almost 20%, so from nearly £53 to only 37, a cut of £16 a week. So obviously disastrous in terms of the little money that people have access to. Next slide, please. The methodology is weird, to be honest. If I may say so, that the Home Office have used to calculate asylum support. Well, weird in my opinion. Up until 2020, they were using a methodology which was kind of a pick and mix methodology. So they would use the data from the Office of National Statistics for the lowest 10% of people's income in the country for some stuff, mostly food stuff, and market research for other stuff. So in relation to market research, this essentially involved them listing the items that they thought would cover people's essential living needs, sending people out into shops to see how much they cost, totting it up to see how much they think that it would cost to have your essential living needs met, over a period of a year, and then dividing it by 52 to come up with a weekly total, and then, if required, increasing that for inflation. So it's weird. I mean, I've put some of the stuff there that they consider to be necessary for essential living needs is on the slide, but some examples. So they would say that 4 bottles of baby bath, 4 bottles of shampoo, 4 bottles of baby lotion, 4 bottles of baby oil, and 4 bottles of baby powder are what is needed over a year for a child. And send people out to see how much that costs, and then divide the total. Basically, that's how their methodology works. Next slide, please. Or worked. And this changed, however, in 2021. So in 2021, things changed, and all of the mystery shopping and all of the ONS stuff went out of the window, and they just took the flat rate from 2020 and increased it by the CPI rate to come up with £40.85. Ross mentioned at the beginning the judicial review, which has very recently been brought by the brilliant Greater Manchester Law Centre in relation to asylum support rates. Fantastic work by them. As I understand it, the result of that was effectively that the Home Secretary was found to have been acting irrationally and unlawfully in respect of asylum support rates. The Home Secretary had been advised by her civil servants that essential living needs were not now being covered by asylum support because of the rise in the cost of living, and because inflation has been so high, and didn't do anything about it. And further, that there hadn't been a kind of rationale from the change in methodology, from the methodology that they were using previously, to just like this flat rate increase that they did in 2021. That has resulted in an order by the court, as I understand it, to increase asylum support rates to £45, and that was announced at the back end of last year. That change should have now been implemented. I believe that's quite an unusual decision for that kind of order to be made. So that's the most recent development in relation to asylum support. 1 minute left. Okay, next slide. So support currently stands at 58% of universal credit, and the graph there is a briefing from the Migration Observatory, and the point really is to show the decrease in what that means in real terms. So now asylum support is 27% lower than it previously was in 2000. So people seeking asylum are much less real terms money than they were 20 years ago, which shows you the direction of travel. Next slide, please. Earlier speakers spoke much more better about this than I could, but essentially this is a report we did in 2020 about the effect of asylum support, how difficult it is to live on it. You can see some of the findings there. We're looking to repeat this exercise this year. So if you want to get involved in terms of getting surveys out to people so that they can say how difficult it is to live on asylum support, and that could be used for policy purposes and lobbying, please do let us know. Next slide, please. And finally, the asks. So our asks in relation to asylum support are firstly, reinstate the link to welfare benefits. 70% of the over 25 rate of universal credit is what we think people should get. Increase additional payments, equalise and increase the maternity grant, make the application easier. They should reevaluate their approach. Instead of this punitive essential living needs standard, they should look at some of the work of, for example, Joseph Rowntree, who were looking at what people need to live a socially acceptable minimum standard of living. And finally, give people the right to work so that they can provide for themselves and their families, and not have to live on punitive measures of asylum support. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Julia, and thank you for keeping to time. That's incredibly helpful. I mean, it's clearly an area where there's been a lot of work over a long period of time trying to address the appallingly low rates of asylum support. And I think the campaigning to address this becomes even more critical as we see the higher rates of inflation eroding the amounts of money that women receive, and indeed all asylum seekers receive right now. So thanks very much for that. We'll move now to questions. If people would like to put their hand up, that would be really helpful. I'm sure there's questions that people would like to ask. I'm sure there are questions. I cannot believe that this group is going to sit quietly. Thank you. Yes, H Wicks. I'm not sure your full name is.
Yeah, it's Harriet. Hi. I just wanted to direct my questions to Julia if possible. So basically, I'm looking after predominantly the women that are within hotel accommodation, and I've been in the last kind of six to 9 months, women are receiving letters to say that they're no longer getting the supplements now over 20 weeks now in pregnancy, or when the child is born, when they're in hotel accommodation. Last time I spoke to Refugee Action about it, it's really difficult to find any information, but I spoke to Refugee Action, they were saying that it was going through the courts to look at that and to see whether women should be reinstated, because I know that previously women were receiving that. Is there any information on whether that's changed or any updates on that?
Can anyone answer that, Julia?
I can't really answer it. I do know that there is a challenge. I think DPG are bringing a challenge in relation to maternity payments, but I'm afraid I don't really have the detail. However, a colleague of mine I know does. So maybe if you shoot me your email address in the chat, and I'll look into it and see what I can find out.
Thank you. It's so hard to get any information from anybody, so that's really helpful.
No, thanks for raising that. We will be sending out a note after this event, so we'll be sharing slides and some other things, and if we've got information like that we can pass on, we'll do that as well. Thanks for raising that. Norma, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you everybody. It's couldn't be more depressing, the situation changing so badly, and it seems to me that listening to the people with the lived experience and all of the people that are involved, that the main campaign we should be all involved in is the right to work. That gives a sense of dignity. It stops the whole charity, and begging bowl thing. And I don't think organisations are making enough of that. And I think we should really concentrate, all of us, on the right to work. That means that people have dignity. And when people work within a situation, it reduces the racist response towards that labelling of people. So just with Julia talking about it, but just in context, that seems to me where we should be really putting our energies.
Thanks very much, Norma. We will be moving to breakout rooms after this and talking about what we think are the key points of intervention here. So it's good to have your thoughts. Eunice.
Oh, hi. Hello, Julia. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's really great and very informative. And please, I would like to ask, you mentioned about the increment of the asylum support to £45. Are the women going to receive any letter, like for them to know that the support has been increased, or how they get the information? Because I've not heard anyone saying that the support has been increased to that amount.
So Eunice, your question is, are asylum seeking women going to get a letter about the increase in the rates of asylum support? Is that the question?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Can anyone answer that? No?
I don't. Oh, sorry. I'm not aware. I'm sorry, we're not, because we don't actually do casework. I'm not aware if the Home Office have written out individually to people. What I do know is that the support, that increase should now be in place. Yeah. There was a kind of glitch on the Home Office computer system, I think, when it was coming into place, but that support should now be in place and people should now be receiving it. I think there's probably people on this call that know more than me about the mechanics of it.
Thanks, Jerry.
Jerry and Maria probably knows too, yeah. But the stuff I've seen on is that it will be backdated to when the decision was made, and it should be rolling out just as we speak, and that individuals should be getting that. But they're saying it's going to be backdated to the date decision. Is that your understanding, Maria, as well?
Yeah, and just to highlight, it's an interim amount, so it might well go up again. So it was, I think they were ordered to with immediate effect, to increase it to 45, and then they're going to review it. So it could go up a little bit more. Probably won't, know the hell else, but pence probably. But yeah, so perhaps the letters will go out once it's all sort of finalised.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would also want to say that I like the part that Julia said we should give women the right to work so that they can have their freedom. That's the main solution. And what Norman said, if we can have campaign on the right to work, that's the solution. They have to set them free so that they can work, they can live their life that they want to live, so that they will not have any burden on anyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eunice. And I might just add in the chat, Nasrat has put in some quite useful information on this if you want to have a look at that. Again, we can share this when we send a note out afterwards. I've got a note, S. McAuliffe. I'm sorry, I don't know your first name. Would you like to ask a question?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, my question is about Healthy Start, really, and it kind of links in with the vitamin question. As a system, we're right across GM, we're trying to increase the uptake of Healthy Start, but particularly to those who need it the most. So midwives carry the vitamins with them, and also health visitors are starting to do that, and they're all accessible in the children's centres as well. So I'm not sure what the systems are, whether in the past they've been delivered to some of the bed and breakfasts and hotels before. I don't know about that, but every woman who is entitled to Healthy Start is entitled to vitamins during a pregnancy and up to 4 years afterwards as well. Or the children if they're breastfeeding. So they should be getting them up through their health professionals if they are entitled to them. Now, I know for no recourse of public funds, again, it's really difficult because their application process is a paper one. It has to go through a separate email address, and it's not made to be the easiest process to actually get the benefit. But my second part to my question really is, does it make a difference? I don't know if anybody knows this. Does it make a difference to their other benefits if they are successful in their application to Healthy Start? So there are other maternity benefits like the £5 for the baby and the £3 for the mum. Does that Healthy Start benefit make a difference? Can they claim both, I think is what I'm saying.
I think so. Good question. Jerry, I might put you on the spot.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks for that. Right, so an asylum seeker wouldn't be entitled to the Healthy Start scheme because they have the other £3 payments and the £5 payments are meant to reflect that, well, particularly the £3 in pregnancy. So asylum seekers are not entitled to Healthy Start. Neither is other groups at no recourse to public funds, unless, and this is the result of a challenge, they have a British child. So a family with no recourse to public funds who has a British child, the ruling said that group would qualify, that child would qualify. But there's some hurdles around it, and there's been a lot of administrative problems, and it's not actually as straightforward as it should be, and people have lobbied to improve the guidelines around it. So although it was great, because there's a lot of challenges and a chipping away at this lack of eligibility from many different things, and there's some solicitors doing marvellous work around chipping away at some of these, and one of them was the Healthy Start scheme for those with British children, but obviously like to expand that to all pregnant women who have no recourse to public funds, which is really the ultimate goal. So it is normally pegged, if you're on a benefit, you get the Healthy Start. Otherwise, the other groups are excluded, except for that, including asylum seekers, but except for those with British children. But that's problematic in the administration of it. I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah.
And in terms of the vitamins, there are boroughs, so Salford, Manchester, and I think there's a couple of others in the Greater Manchester who've actually commissioned the Healthy Start vitamins for all pregnant women and women with young children as well. So it's worth kind of pushing that within your systems and local authorities?
Thanks very much, Sue. I think there's probably quite good work we can do in connecting up some of the organisations with your work here. So we'll be in touch outside the meeting. That's helpful. Angela, I think you're next. Your hand's up next.
Yeah, no, my question was actually also about the Healthy Start thing, because we had the training and we were told, because I asked the question whether women would be eligible for it. I work with Refugee Women Connect, by the way. And I was told that they definitely were entitled to it. And then with the citizens' advice on prescription, we got them to apply for all the women, and all of them were rejected. So the issue of on the literature, it sort of says if the baby's born in the UK, they are eligible to apply. However, when we actually applied, none of them were eligible, which annoys me, because it's you're either saying some children benefit from these healthy extra bonuses, and the women and babies who are asylum seekers and refugees won't benefit from it. It's my recent bugbear, and I'm not quite sure what to do about it, because it's just so blatantly unjust.
No, thanks for that, Angela. It's really very frustrating. I'm wondering if we might actually take this offline and just have a look at what we can do to help get correct information out there, and also connect up the people who might be able to directly support the women to take advantage of this where they can.
Can I just very, very quickly just say there's the GM Healthy Task Force, which I'm a member of, Healthy Start Task Force. So I'll pop my email in the box, and then be really great if we could flag that up to the task force, because we're doing a lot of work around trying to make Healthy Start more accessible.
Great, thank you, Sue. We'll definitely be in contact. Thanks. And of course, everyone else who can make helpful contact too, please do that also. I think we just lost a hand there. I had one more person, Onyeka. Did you want to speak? No? Okay, we'll wrap up the Q&A. There'll be hopefully opportunities a little bit later. We're going to be moving into breakout groups after this. And so just a 2-minute break, but Michaela will move you all into breakout groups. And in our breakout groups, as you will have seen from the papers that went out, we're going to look at 3 questions. What are our most important campaign asks? Who do we need to influence? And what arguments will persuade them? So I think there was the case put very strongly for right to work to be the focus of campaigning. I'm very interested to hear what people think is the most useful thing for us to focus on at this time. So it'd be really helpful if people could stay and take part in the breakout groups. We'll be taking, I think, 20 minutes, which is 12:05, and then we'll come back and do a quick report back and wrap up. So if we could just take 2 minutes out now if people need a comfort break, and then move straight into the breakout groups. Thanks very much. From each, we will dive immediately into getting the report backs from the breakout rooms. Now, it doesn't need to be the person who facilitated it who's doing the report back, but I'll just name the facilitators so you can say who it is from your group. And if you could keep your report back just to about 2 minutes, that would be really helpful. If you want to provide a more detailed write-up afterwards, that would be fantastic. Okay, so let's start with Jerry's group. Who's reporting back from there?
Julia.
Hi. So very briefly, I think there were probably 3 main themes that were touched on in our group. We talked about how the lack of suitable accommodation was a massive problem, lack of facilities and equipment for mothers, and a massive risk to people's health and well-being. We talked about the need to influence the Home Office in relation to accommodation, but also local authorities. We spoke about the need to work in our communities, particularly with the advent of more hotel accommodation, to combat hostility and racism in our local communities, and the need for awareness raising there. We talked about the need to move that forward into schools, and make sure that our young people understand the realities of what it is to flee. And yes, and we also referenced the right to work and how it was incredibly important that this was a right to work and not an obligation to work. We talked about the fact that mothers need to be with their babies when they've had babies, and that childcare is a massive issue, and that those need to be built into any campaigns on the right to work. And we talked about how trying to realise the right to work is really difficult because of the barriers that are in the way of people embarking on a status, and how that also needs to be figured into plans for to win the right to work, such as the work of the Lift the Ban Coalition.
Brilliant. That's an incredibly swift run through what sounds like a really interesting discussion. Thank you very much, Julia. So Kate's group, who's going to be reporting back from that group?
Yeah, that'd be me. So just to go, we managed to get through quite a lot. So a lot around accommodation, about the lack of accommodation, people staying in hotels for too long, and that perhaps we could use arguments around safeguarding, particularly the impact that has on children and babies, you know, things like the 6 weeks guidance that children shouldn't be in bed and breakfast for longer than that, that's being ignored, and that perhaps there's more we could do around that. In terms of the right to work, the Lifting the Ban campaign, that was also seen as something that would be really useful. That in the Republic of Ireland, apparently asylum seekers took action and got the right to work, so we might be able to learn some lessons from that experience. Shunting people into hotels, that what should be happening is that more accommodation should be made available rather than putting people into hotels, and we should be going to MPs, pressurising local authorities and finding out about what's being done at a strategic level. We also talked about some of the contractors not meeting their performance indicators, so companies like G4S, Serco, and that what's been effective with campaigning against G4S was going to council meetings and protesting, but we need research and information about these companies, and we need local authorities to be more concerned about them not meeting their obligations. And then we talked generally about, you know, seeking wider support, so getting more organisations involved, particularly perhaps trade unions might have a role to play in this and be supportive. And that would also help us to get the message out, because again, there's a lot of prejudice in society and we need to counter that and some of the misconceptions and myths. And organisations feeling overwhelmed, particularly if they do casework. So it's really hard to find time and resources to do campaigning work. So it's important to hear the voices of the women who are being and others who are being affected. But again, difficult to get hold of them quite often, have their voices heard because of the lives that they lead. But doing webinars like this, sharing resources and ideas, people generally felt was really useful, you know, given the pressures that are on all the organisations that work in this area. So I think unless anybody else from that group wants to add anything, I think that's the gist of it.
I can't see any hands up. Thanks very much, Kate. That was again really, really good overview in 30 seconds or less of what sounds like quite wide-ranging conversation, which takes us to our third group. Sarah, would you like to report back?
Yeah, shall I just do it? Okay, so I think we started out by discussing what had been said a little bit earlier about the right to work, kind of activism around that being really important. I think we did feel that, but we had a discussion about kind of the not tension exactly, but so obviously with the right to work, there are lots of arguments about how that's good for, you know, the people involved, good for wider society, because we, you know, we benefit from people being able to utilize their talents, and it's not good for anybody to have people, you know, being forced not to be able to work. However, you also need to have kinds of the infrastructure in place. We spoke about childcare, because obviously that, you know, that's always inextricably linked with work. And about how no recourse families don't get the 30 hours, and just that you kind of need the safety net, because, you know, for example, and it's typically women with substantial care and responsibilities, you know, potentially struggle to access work. So it's kind of the balance of those two things. The discussion kind of moved on to, I think we were talking about from lived experience, the importance of English, and structural barriers in the way to becoming, fluent in English. So I think we were talking about how people starting, ESOL at the colleges in September or whatever, which is great, but there isn't that flexibility. So if you're not there in time to start in September, you might have to wait a long time. So those were issues as well, kind of access to education in English. And then we also talked about kind of discrimination in wider society as well, in terms of things like qualifications not being raised, and people who aren't native English speakers being discriminated against. And then we talked about housing as well, specifically hotels, because obviously that's a huge and ongoing problem. In terms of kind of who to influence, I think mostly people were talking about policymakers, and Pfizer had a really good kind of metaphor about watering the ground and like it bearing fruit and stuff, being about going right to the top. But we also talked about links that we can make with each other, basically. And I think Eunice made a really good point as well about, we're talking about the right to work for asylum seekers and stuff, but she was arguing for it to be kind of expanded to all the group of undocumented people who have pending applications and are in the system, because they may have applications based on, say, family or length of residence and stuff, and the challenges are very similar. And then is there anything else? I think that was about it, wasn't it? We said quite a lot.
Yes, I think I was in that group, and there was quite a good discussion, covered a lot of ground. So thanks, Sarah. So I think what we've got from the group discussions is I think some very clear sense of key issues that this group would see as priorities. So accommodation, absolutely top issue here. Poor quality, women being stuck in hotels, not enough available at local level, problems with contractors, challenges associated with right to work being a key issue, but it does need to be not an obligation and recognised care responsibilities. So things like childcare and so on needs to be sustained around that. Looking at the challenge of combating racism and negative attitudes in the community, huge challenge, I think, particularly in the current environment, and challenges of hearing women's voices. And of course, alongside that, some very practical questions around things like English language training. I'm sure if we had more time, people would raise other issues and would come up with brilliant ideas about how we can campaign on this. We don't unfortunately have sufficient time today to do more on this, but what we will be doing is we'll send out some materials from today, so the slides that people have given us, also the recording of today's sessions so that people can access that, and those who weren't able to attend can see it. And we'll look to see what else we can be doing that will be helpful in this space. So it's interesting hearing particularly around some of the work around Healthy Start and some other things where we may be helpful and be able to sort of link people up, because we are doing work specifically in Greater Manchester at the moment, with more to come this year. So I think on that base, at that point, I might actually just wrap up by saying thank you to all of our brilliant contributors. I think we had some absolutely fantastic presentations today. So we had Angie, Jay, Marcida, Maria, Bianca and Julia all providing presentations. So thank you very much to these speakers, also specifically to WAS Manchester and Refugee Women Connect for supporting the two lived experience speakers. So I'd now just like to thank the Maternity Action team who's made today happen, particularly Kate Moran, Joey Hickey, Lisa Roscoe, Michaela Lee, Catherine Pellegrino, Christine Benson, Sarah Bezic and Neela Khan. Thank you very much, everyone.